Discover how one employee unexpectedly transformed the lives of Millionaire's crying kids. Jake's day at the medical office was a whirlwind. Charts piled high, phones ringing incessantly, and patient schedules spilling over like a tipped cup of coffee. As the sole guardian of his younger siblings, he struggled to keep the chaos at bay. Each breath felt heavy with the weight of grief from the loss of his parents, anxiety pooling in his chest as he balanced work with family duties. Today felt different. An urgent knot tightened in his stomach. Financial concerns hovered over him like a thundercloud. Suddenly, a commotion erupted at the reception desk. A wealthy man, Mr. Richards, stormed in, dragging two affluent children, both crying loudly. They looked disheveled, their pristine clothes a stark contrast to the messy emotions spilling out. Jake noticed how the children's sobs echoed through the waiting room, a sound both piercing and haunting. He felt a wave of unease wash over him, for he knew this intensity all too well. In this moment, despite their socio-economic disparity, Jake felt a pang of sympathy. Wealth couldn't shield them from emptiness. Pushing through instinctive hesitation, he knelt to their level. His voice softened as he introduced himself. "Hey, I know you're having a rough day. Want to hear about my little brother and sister? They can be a handful, too," he began, sharing tales of silly moments and the resilience of family. Gradually, their tears subsided, replaced by reluctant giggles. Jake felt an unusual confidence ignite. It surprised him how easily he connected with the children, channeling his own familial struggles into something meaningful. Their laughter was infectious, and even Mr. Richards seemed to soften, observing Jake with a new curiosity. But just as Jake felt a glimmer of hope, Mr. Richards offered him a check for his efforts. A jolt of panic surged through him. Accepting money felt like a betrayal. He wouldn't want to commodify this brief respite. The weight of unspoken expectations hung between them, suffocating and confusing. His mind raced, battling conflicting thoughts. His siblings' needs versus the integrity of the emotional connection he had fostered with Mr. Richards's children. He wanted to scream at the unfairness of it all. Before Jake could respond, Mr. Richards revealed an unexpected truth. "You might not know this, but our families, they were intertwined long before tragedy struck. There's a legacy here," he said, his tone serious. The revelation shook Jake to his core, intertwining his deepest fears with his already tumultuous present. What did this legacy mean? And how would it change his perception of family and support? He became unsure of what it meant to be a guardian, battling the weight of financial insecurity, while now grappling with the knowledge of a previously unknown connection. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. As Jake caught sight of Mr. Richards's intense gaze, determination mingled with despair. Would accepting this money mean abandoning the values he cherished? The idea of legacy weighed heavily on him, encasing him in despair. Thoughts collided in his mind, feelings of isolation and insignificance. The stakes felt unbearably high. His gaze shifted to the children, still wide-eyed and seeking comfort. He hesitated, muscles tense, heart racing. In them, he saw reflections of his own siblings. Would he alter their fate by embracing this connection, or spare them the burden of wealth without genuine love? And as uncertainty consumed him, the line between wealth and worth faded, pressing him to face an unavoidable truth. Would he redefine what family meant, or would he remain steadfast? His heart twisted as he locked eyes with Mr. Richards. The question loomed large. What choice would he make when pushed to his limits? Jake's heart pounded against his chest, a relentless reminder of the impending decision that weighed heavily on him. The air was thick with tension, vibrating with the essence of duty and desperation. As Mr. Richards stood before him, his expression imploring, Jake felt the walls of his reality begin to close in. Hadn't his life been an endless series of choices, each more harrowing than the last? He had learned to navigate resentment, grief, and now the profound echoes of potential wealth and legacy. "Mr. Richards, I appreciate the offer," Jake finally spoke, voice steady but trembling inside. "But I can't accept money for comforting your kids." The words felt like a release, yet the gravity of his statement echoed in his mind. Was he being noble or short-sighted? A part of him wanted to run, to distance himself from the very idea of intertwining this moment with transactional consequences. "Think about it for a moment," Mr. Richards replied, his tone revealing an underlying urgency. "Our families share a history, and this connection could be more than just financial. It could mean a support system for your siblings." The proposition tugged at Jake's heart, igniting visions of stability for his siblings, who had been weathering storms alone. Each night, he had been straddling his own responsibilities and burdens, grappling with late bills and the quiet fear of failure. His resolve faltered, uncertainty cascading over him like a heavy blanket. Yes, he had once thought of wealth as a corrupting force, but perhaps there was a pathway where it could mean refuge. Yet, acceptance couldn't come without a price, could it? Jake's thoughts spiraled back to the children, vacillating between tears and laughter. Instinct came alive in him. He could channel their pain into strength, but at what expense to his notion of self-worth? "I don't want to make this about money," he heard himself assert, the words tasting bitter. "I want to be genuine." The children's needs pushed him to redefine the parameters of integrity. Mr. Richards's expression shifted, a mix of respect and disappointment. He stood taller, crossing his arms. "Jake, it takes strength to accept help, an acknowledgement that even the strongest of us sometimes need a lift." Was Mr. Richards right? Jake pondered the thought, his mind racing through the memories of his parents' sacrifices, how they had striven to leave him and his siblings without burdens, without a reliance on those with wealth. Yet here he was, faced with an opportunity to remain steadfast in those lessons, or to shatter them for the sake of his siblings' security. Maybe your legacy isn't just about the money, but what it can facilitate. Mr. Richards pressed on, eyes locked with Jake's. Think about it. Working together could unearth something monumental. A fire sparked deep within Jake, one fueled by the need to protect and nurture his siblings. What if he could redefine legacy as a promise of love and security? Not just the kind tied to wealth, but one anchored in support and understanding. Jake stood still, the swirling emotions coiling tighter until clarity broke through. He realized that this moment wasn't about losing himself, but rather evolving, understanding that accepting help could be a strength, not a failure. "Can we talk about what this means?" Jake finally asked, surprise coursing through him. The words were tentative, yet steeped in newfound resolve. "I want to create a plan, one that considers not just money, but our families together." Mr. Richards's face illuminated, a mixture of relief and excitement washing over him. "Yes, that's exactly what I hoped for." As they began to brainstorm, Jake felt a shift inside. What once felt like unbearable tension now flickered with possibilities. He could embrace the complexity of the situation, no longer in fear, but in a quest for connection and understanding. And as the conversation unfolded, the thrill of collaboration filled him with hope and direction. Only then did a nagging thought creep in. Amidst this change, would he set aside his deep-seated apprehensions about wealth and the impact it could have on their lives? With each dialogue, Jake recognized that he was on a journey toward redefining his path, but at the same time, shadows loomed at the edges of his mind. Would he remain true to himself, despite forging new connections? As the possibilities stretched out before him, anticipating the adventures and trials they would face together, a new crisis emerged in the form of an unexpected phone call that would change everything he thought he knew about his family's past. Who was calling and what revelation awaited on the other end? The phone rang, slicing through the air with a jarring clarity. Jake's fingers brushed against the cold screen, hesitation seeping into his veins. A sense of foreboding washed over him as he excused himself momentarily from the conversation with Mr. Richards. The anxiety of the impending call felt tangible, and he briefly considered ignoring it entirely. But that instinct to confront uncertainty, however unnerving, propelled him to answer. "Hello?" he managed, heart thumping as though awaiting judgment. "Jake? It's Clara." A familiar voice broke through the static. His estranged aunt's tone was abrasive, yet laced with a hint of urgency that piqued his interest. "We need to talk. It's about your parents." Jake's breath caught in his throat. What could Clara possibly have to say that would pertain to his parents, whose memories he had staunchly safeguarded? "Can it wait?" Jake replied somewhat harshly, instinctively bristling at the prospect of reopening old wounds. For years, the strained familial dynamics had kept him tethered to the surface of his own emotions, barely scratching the realm of closure. "No, Jake, it can't. It's important," she insisted, each word dripping with gravity that felt almost unbearable. "Fine," he relented, mental walls bracing for the deluge that would follow. "I'll meet you." An hour later, as he drove toward the diner that had once served as a battleground for family tensions, Jake's mind raced with questions, each darker than the last. What could possibly surface that hadn't already haunted him? Clara sat in a dimly lit booth, her features etched with the shadows of hard truths. The silence between them felt heavy, years of separation forming an unspoken chasm. "Why now?" Jake pressed, irritation bubbling beneath the surface. "What could you possibly have to say that I don't already know?" With a sigh that seemed to deflate the very essence of her being, Clara leaned forward, her voice dropping to a whisper that commanded attention. "I know about the business your parents built before they—" she faltered, memories clawing at the edge of her composure. "They were involved in something significant, and you deserve to understand what happened." Confusion clouded Jake's mind. He pictured the legacy of hard work crafted by his parents, the struggles they endured. But significant? "Why should I believe you?" Jake shot back, a protective anger swelling within him. The notion that there was more to uncover felt like a betrayal, each new revelation burlier than the last. "Because you deserve the truth, Jake," she replied softly yet firmly. "And this conversation could change everything for you and your siblings, just like the situation with Mr. Richards." The implications loomed large, twisting hope and fear in equal measure. Could this discovery help redefine everything he had worked toward? Was he, after all his resistance, finally on the precipice of understanding the totality of his family's past? "I just need to know if I can trust you," Jake said, grappling with the sharp edges of uncertainty that felt imminent. "You've spent years apart from us for your own reasons. What changed?" "In light of recent events, I realized you deserve an explanation to make sense of the chaos that follows our family. You need to decide what legacy you want to forge." Her words sank in, each syllable pressing against his consciousness, enthralling him with the power they carried. He felt himself at a critical junction, where the decisions he made today could echo through the lives of his siblings and shape their futures. As they talked, layers of complexity unraveled around the truth of his family's business. Ambitions built on fragile foundations could lead to either redemption or ruin. And Jake realized he stood at the crossroads, not only for his family's legacy, but for his own understanding of worth, financial or emotional. Just then, a defiant thought slammed through his cool exterior. If every action carries consequence, perhaps it's time to confront the unanswered questions about his parents instead of shying away. "I still don't know if I'm ready for this," Jake admitted. "But if we're going to redefine our family's story, I won't let fear dictate my path any longer." Clara studied him, a flicker of pride shadowing her weary features. But just as hope began weaving its intricate tapestry around him, a storm cloud of doubt surged. What if it all falls apart? His voice trembled with the weight of this new revelation. Was he prepared to rediscover pain and, in turn, connection? Clara's response hovered on the edge of his consciousness, but the weight of her knowledge pulled Jake further into the unknown, leaving him painfully aware that understanding their family's history might lead to a truth far more daunting than he had anticipated. And as the weight of the future pressed down on him, another thought seeped into his mind. What if there were forces working to prevent him from discovering the truth about his parents? And would he choose to fight them, or would he risk everything for what he believed in? Amidst new uncertainties, Jake realized that his clarity was only a fragile proposition. Amidst potential alliances and looming adversities, he saw shadows of confrontation he never expected. As his journey unfolded, he braced for a storm that seemed to be gathering strength on the horizon. Jake's mind was ablaze with possibilities as he left the diner. Each step away from Clara felt heavier than the last. The air outside felt charged, almost like an electric crackle before a storm. He couldn't shake the weight of what she had revealed. A hidden legacy? The mere thought stretched his perception of his family further than it had ever gone. What if his parents had been involved in something that not only defined their lives, but also reshaped his own? As he got into his car, Jake fought the urge to turn back, to demand more answers. But he knew one truth. He needed time to process the monumental implications of Clara's revelations. With each minute that passed behind the wheel, old shadows curled around his heart. His parents had painted a picture of hard work and perseverance. But now, he feared that picture was only a facade, covering something turbulent beneath. He parked outside his office, hesitating at the entrance as the world inside buzzed unknowingly, oblivious to the internal battle he now faced. The memories of late nights filled with spreadsheets and reconciling accounts flooded him. He prided himself on his ability to manage complex tasks, yet it was now clear he had been avoiding the most intricate and personal of puzzles, his very own family's truth. Jake was determined to harness this uncertainty into action. Instead of retreating into doubt, he would dive deeper. What if uncovering the past could ignite a spark that would break the cycle of fear? As he mounted the stairs to his office, a newfound clarity clung to his every movement. He had to confront these shadows, not just for himself, but for his siblings, who were themselves drifting further into the unknown. Inside, the usual ambience of the office felt different, charged with his resolve. His colleagues were engrossed in their routines, yet Jake couldn't quite focus on the mundane tasks waiting at his desk. A stirring sense of urgency propelled him to plow through emails and meetings. He realized he wouldn't be just another cog in a machine. He was on the cusp of discovering something life-altering. Over the next few days, Jake reframed his approach. He allocated time to research his family's business, sifting through old financial documents and memories. Each name and transaction felt like breadcrumbs leading him through the labyrinth of his parents' lives. What financial peril had they faced? What achievements, bound in secrecy, had they pursued that warranted Clara's clandestine tone? Simultaneously, Jake began reaching out to professionals in the industry his parents had once thrived in. One phone call led to another, and soon he found himself drawn into a web of narratives that painted a less than rosy picture of their past endeavors. Each conversation peeled away layers of ignorance, revealing not only their failures, but also glimpses of their resilience. Yet with each passing day, the tug of apprehension tightened around his chest. What if he uncovered connections they had desperately tried to conceal? Would it be more burdensome to their legacy if he were to unearth those hidden truths? He grappled with ethical dilemmas that pricked at his conscience. Could he still honor their memory while bringing to light the realities of their choices? One late afternoon, Jake received a call that sent his heart racing. An old associate from his parents' business wanted to meet. A chance encounter that seemed orchestrated by fate. The individual claimed to hold pieces of the puzzle Jake desperately sought. This was it. The convergence of fear and hope hung thick in the air. As Jake prepared for the meeting, he felt the remnants of doubt still lurking within, but determination surged. This was not just about his parents anymore. It was about forging a new identity, reframing his understanding of his worth, and learning to weave their legacy into something meaningful for both him and his siblings. But as night fell and the shadows grew, Jake was painfully aware that uncovering these truths might also awaken adversaries he never knew existed. What consequences would he face as he ventured further into this complex terrain? The weight of transformation loomed like an ominous clock, counting down the moments before the revelations would drop like a final gust of wind before a storm. Jake steeled himself for the confrontation ahead, not just with others, but with the truth about his family and himself. As he looked out into the darkness, he wondered if he was ready to face whatever awaited him on the other side of realization. Tomorrow's meeting would be critical. What if there lay within it the key to everything he was fighting for? Did he truly have the fortitude to handle the legacy that awaited him, or would it consume him? The anxiety gripped him tightly, leaving behind only moments of quiet introspection as the dawn approached. As the sun crested the horizon, casting streaks of light across his room, Jake woke with a jolt. Anxiety buzzed in his veins like a live wire, reminding him of the gravity of the day that lay ahead. The meeting with his parents' former associate wasn't just a casual conversation. It was a moment that could reverberate through the very fabric of his family's history. He meticulously arranged his notes, trying to channel his nerves into focus, each word like a step in a dance he had yet to master. As he drove to the coffee shop where they had agreed to meet, the doubts surged like an unwelcome tide. Could he trust this person? What if they were after something other than the truth? This sense of betrayal gnawed at him. Yet another part of him couldn't shake the thrill of discovery. What if today changed everything? Nestled in a corner booth, Jake tapped his fingers rhythmically against his leg, drawing the attention of passing patrons. The collection of old receipts, fading photographs, and hastily scrawled notes before him felt like a silent army waiting for his command. The more he stared, the more he realized he wasn't just examining his past, he was sizing up his future. The door swung open, and a figure shuffled in, moving with the familiarity of someone who had experienced both triumph and despair. Jake barely recognized him as the reports had described a dynamic individual. Now, he appeared haggard, burdened by the weight of their shared history. Jake squared his shoulders, welcoming the man to a seat across from him. "Jake, right?" the stranger asked cautiously, peering through the fog of his past. They exchanged pleasantries, but the air between them crackled with unspoken tension. Eventually, Jake gestured to the scattered documents before them. "I need to know about my parents," he said. "All of it, the good and the bad." Without hesitation, the man began to share stories of sweat and ambition. Jake listened intently as tales of success skidded into cautionary tales of mismanagement and desperation. Suddenly, the portrait of his family morphed from polished anecdotes into a collage of flawed humanity. Each revelation stirred discomfort, yet he remained resolute. Understanding, after all, was the first step toward breaking free from inherited burdens. "Do you know why they kept so much from you?" The man probed, eyes narrowing with each word. "They believed shielding you would spare you from their failures. But in doing so, they blinded you from what it truly means to own your legacy." The accusation stung, igniting a flare of resentment within Jake. Could he really be so naive as to only see the surface? Each moment spent dissecting the family narrative had begged for deeper exploration, but fear had anchored him in ignorance. "I need to confront this," Jake admitted, his voice firm. "I'm not just interested in my parents' story. I want to redefine it. I need to know how to carry this forward for my siblings." As his determination spilled into each word, Jake felt the potential weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This was not just about uncovering behind-the-scenes drama. It was a call to integrate the past into a new vision of hope. The idea of becoming the architect of his family's legacy invigorated him, propelling him beyond self-doubt. The man nodded slowly, a hint of respect flickering in his expression. "There's a lot more to uncover. But remember, transforming that legacy will demand your authenticity, You will need to face opposition, not just from the outside, but from within yourself as well. Jake wrestled with that thought. What did authenticity mean in the context of hidden truths? Would confronting those truths mean risking the fragile balance he had with his family's memory? As the conversation transitioned into potential future paths, Jake felt a surge of excitement, each possibility igniting a fire in his core. This was more than a meeting, it was a catalyst. With newfound clarity, he realized he was not just restoring a tarnished legacy, but building something entirely his own. But just as they began mapping out next steps, chatter erupted nearby, edging towards an uncomfortable topic, the black sheep of the family legacy. Eavesdropping on harsh critiques of familial relationships sent an unexpected wave of shame through him. The outsider's judgment was stark against the backdrop of his own struggles. People will talk, and sometimes it's hard to silence them, but their opinions don't define who you are, the man reassured him, sensing the fracture in Jake's resolve. Clarity sharpened with every exchange, digging deeper into the complexities he must confront. He understood that the journey was no longer a passive exploration. It was a challenge to face not only the weight of his family's secrets, but the critic that resided inside him. As he left the hastily scribbled insights scattered on the table, Jake felt an unshakable momentum fueling him. Yet lingering doubts still loomed. Could he navigate the treacherous waters of family history without losing himself in the process? The sun dipped low on the horizon, casting long shadows that echoed the uncertain path ahead. Jake took a deep breath, understanding this was only the beginning. The road stretched out before him, littered with challenges. But loss was no longer his only companion. He was ready to confront the unknown, ready to step into a legacy of his own making. But as he walked away from the cafe, unease snagged at his thoughts. What dark elements might he disturb in his search for truth? Time would tell if he would emerge unscathed, or if buried secrets would take root in the heart of his evolving story. Jake's steps quickened as he made his way to the car, his mind racing through the revelations he had just absorbed. Each story, each detail, had layered a new complexity to the tapestry of his family's history. With every step, his resolve shifted from mere curiosity to a determined pursuit. But the shadows that played tricks on his mind warned of impending chaos. A sense of conflict ignited within him. Once seated in the car, the smell of leather mingled with the fresh air flooding through the slightly cracked window. He gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling the vibrations from the engine pulse through him as if it were his own heartbeat. It was time to take control. It was time to move beyond the narratives imposed by familial ties and create a narrative that was undeniably his own. His first stop was the public library. The idea of perusing through archives and dusty volumes seemed almost comforting amidst the swirling doubts in his mind. There was something about tangible resources, books, papers, that felt secure. They wouldn't lie to him, wouldn't present one version of truth while harboring another. Walking through the library aisles, he scrutinized the titles, allowing the scent of paper and ink to wash over him. The past filled the rooms. Stories lived deeply among these shelves. Researching not just his family, but the broader context in which they operated felt essential. It was vital to see the world through the lens of their choices. Sifting through genealogies and local newspapers, Jake began to connect dots. The stories told by the man at the cafe were merely a fraction of a much fuller picture. He began to grasp the intricate web of relationships and decisions that had impacted not only his parents, but their friends and foes. His understanding matured, morphing into a blend of compassion and critique. Yet, the deeper he delved, the darker the waters became. The once heroic tales of his parents' ambitions transformed under scrutiny into a litany of mistakes, bad decisions, and moral ambiguity. Each discovery illuminated factual fragments of their character, their fears, failures, and sometimes outright negligence. As the daylight dwindled outside, illuminating the library in a golden hue, Jake's heart began to race with the knowledge he unearthed. Could it be that his parents weren't merely victims of circumstance? What responsibility had they willingly taken on? Questions gnawed at him, compelling him to confront not just the ghosts of the past, but the implications shadowing his own identity. Jake lingered too long over one newspaper article that detailed a significant fallout between his parents' business and a rival company. Names were slung, lives disrupted. Doubt began to gnaw at him again, amplifying his fears. Were they wicked or merely naive? Did their failures make him inherently flawed? Suddenly, the library's calm ambiance felt oppressive. He needed to escape the atmosphere of history threatening to suffocate him. Shouldering the weight of these revelations, he exited. The cool evening air washed over him but did little to quell the fury brewing inside. Striding to his car, he was disrupted by the vibration of his phone. A notification blinked, an email from the associate he had met earlier. The subject hinted at more uncovered truths, details that deepened the complexity of his family legacy. Jake's pulse quickened as he opened the message. What else did this man know? What further revelations lay rounded the corner? As anxiety tightened its grip, he realized he had a choice. Retreat from what he had uncovered or press on through the murky truths, regardless of how deep those currents ran. His fingers hovered over the screen. Ignoring the urge to back away, Jake hit reply. He was done sidestepping the truth. Now he had to engage and confront it. The path of self-discovery was no longer about merely piecing together a family history. This was about personal accountability, about evolving into true authenticity. The shadows may still whisper, but Jake felt the burgeoning assurance that he could redirect this legacy, illuminating the dark corners as he prepared to face whatever might emerge. But even as anticipation surged through him, another thought tightened around his heart. Would understanding the depth of these truths ultimately set him free, or would they shackle him with burdens he wasn't yet prepared to carry? The next round of revelations waited just beyond reach, and he felt the familiar sting of doubt rise again as he prepared for the unknown. What new complexities would they unveil, and at what cost to his fragile sense of self? Jake leaned against his car, absorbing the torrent of emotions that roared within. The evening air felt charged, almost electric, as he reread the brief email. Jake, I have information that might change your understanding of your parents' business dealings. The words seemed to taunt him. Every syllable threatened to peel back layers of his carefully constructed self-image. He hesitated, but felt the pull of curiosity and the burgeoning weight of personal responsibility. No longer was he a passive observer of his family's narrative. He had stepped into the role of an active participant. Fueled by an urgency he couldn't quite name, he slid into the driver's seat and started the engine. The low rumble surged beneath him, mirroring his heartbeat as he drove toward the cafe where he would meet the associate once more. As he navigated the streets, his mind replayed the history he was unraveling. Visions of his parents, his father, passionate but reckless, and his mother, whose steely resolve often overshadowed her nurturing side, flickered across his mental landscape. What had they become in pursuit of success? And what had they sacrificed along the way? The lines between villain and victim blurred in a morass of choices and consequences. Arriving at the cafe, he felt a fleeting confidence as he spotted his contact seated at a secluded table, papers scattered in front of him. The man looked up, a shrewd glint in his eye indicating he was ready to divulge secrets that could reshape Jake's world. As Jake approached, he steadied his breath, suppressing doubts that threatened to eclipse his determination. "Jake, glad you could make it," the associate greeted, gesturing for him to sit. "I think it's time we discussed your family's legacy in a more nuanced light." Jake noticed the man flicker through several documents, types blinking under the cafe's soft lighting. The discussions that followed pulled Jake deeper into a labyrinth of his family's past. Cutthroat business deals, dubious alliances, betrayals that left scars on families far and wide. He couldn't ignore the visceral reaction surging in his chest. This was more than just a story. It was an unearthing of moral sins that clung to his lineage like a shadow. "At one point," the associate continued, Your parents engaged in practices that compromised ethical boundaries. It led to a bitter fallout. Each revelation felt like a weight bearing down on Jake's shoulders. Damn them, he thought, for dragging me into this moral quagmire. Sorrows intertwined with sins, as he tried to reconcile the flawed human beings who had raised him with these revelations. Were their missteps grave enough to taint him? The undeniable truth of his ancestry brought an unsettling affirmation of the burdens he now carried. I don't want to inherit their mistakes, he said, frustration lacing his tone. I want to reevaluate, redirect my life. The associate raised an eyebrow. Then understand this. Facing the truth, no matter how ugly, can liberate you. It can help you carve out your own path, separate from theirs. The man leaned forward, eyes intense. But it requires a commitment to authenticity that few are brave enough to make. Jake considered this challenge, a flicker of resolve igniting within him. He needed to not just confront the ghosts of his forebears, but to dismantle their ideologies, to redefine his purpose with moral integrity. It wasn't merely about scrubbing the stains off his identity. It was a quest for authenticity that demanded honesty and courage. As they wrapped up the conversation, Jake felt the transformative potential of understanding seep into his bones. This newfound perspective ignited a powerful question within him. How far was he willing to go to change the trajectory of his own life? What boundaries would he push, and what truths would he reveal? The meeting ended, but the evening lingered, heavy with possibility. As he drove home, a determination coalesced. Every shadow from his past, every mistake he uncovered, would become the soil from which he could grow his own legacy. One not defined by betrayal, but by integrity. Just as he turned the key in the ignition to turn off the car, another email notification pinged. This one was different. It was a name from the past, one he had never wished to reconnect with. It felt like a detour into the darkness he thought he was escaping. Jake's heart raced at the screen, one more reveal that could test every ounce of his newfound resolve. Jake's fingers hovered over the screen, pulse quickening as the name flashed up. Maxine Thompson. The unfamiliar familiarity of it seeped through him like cold water. She was a ghost from a painful chapter of his life, a creditor his parents had kept at bay with broken promises and whispered apologies. Just seeing her name dredged up emotions he'd buried deep, a reminder of consequences he had hoped would stay hidden. The message was succinct, yet ominous. Jake, we need to talk. I have information that could benefit both of us. A tight knot formed in his stomach. The implications were vast. If the associate's revelations were heavy, what could Maxine possibly want to share? Did she hold pieces of his parents' fraught dealings, financial and otherwise, that could shatter his newly formed intentions? He closed the email, frustration boiling over. Should he engage with her? Was reconnecting with someone so entwined in his family's failures worth the risk? But a visceral instinct urged him to dig deeper instead of retreating to the familiarity of denial. This was about more than his parents. This was about his redemption, an opportunity to explore yet another facet of his lineage, confronting the reality of what had been built upon deceit. With a few decisive taps, he responded, proposing a meeting. As he hit send, he felt both terrified and exhilarated. Could he truly separate himself from the tangled web of his family history? The uncertainty gnawed at him, but he was no longer the boy consumed by parental shadows. He had made his decision. He would seek the truth, however unpalatable it might be. Days passed, each one thick with anticipation. Jake spent hours mulling over the implications of what Maxine might reveal, and this period of waiting, while restless, offered valuable introspection. He began reflecting on his approach to conflict, not just the external kind with his family, but internal struggles that had shaped his decisions. Jake was learning that embracing discomfort was a pivotal part of growth. As he prepared for the meeting, he considered the variance in his responses. Previously, he had shied away from confrontation, masking his apprehension with platitudes. But something powerful had shifted within him, The courage to engage, to face the shadows head-on, felt like the necessary alchemy for his transformation. The diner where they agreed to meet felt, in sharp contrast to the cafe, unassuming and suffocating with nostalgia. Jake arrived early, wrestling with the weight of uncertainty. He sat in a booth, glancing at the clock as if counting down the moments until he could sever the binds to his family's turbulent past once and for all. When Maxine arrived, her demeanor was surprisingly calm, carrying herself with a poise born from necessity. She slid into the booth across from him, her expression inscrutable. "Thanks for meeting me, Jake." "Let's get to it, then," he replied, cutting through the air thick with unspoken resentment. Each word felt like a declaration, a commitment to stripping away the layers of deception which had protected him, but had ultimately chained him to his lineage. Maxine studied him, and for a fleeting moment, Jake sensed a flicker of respect in her gaze. "Your parents weren't just names on a ledger, you know. They were skilled manipulators, capable of great influence and great damage." With those words, a current of dread surged through him. Would her truths bolster his resolve, or lay bare further horrors? Jake inhaled sharply, ready to confront the turbulent narrative that was his inheritance. "Then tell me, what do I need to know?" The weight of their familial history loomed around them, but Jake felt different. Instead of viewing it through a lens of victimhood, he was beginning to see it as an uncharted path, one that he would navigate with purpose. Maxine hesitated, then drew something from her bag, a file that appeared as worn as his spirit. "This will explain everything." His pulse quickened. The answers lay within, yet the uncertainty loomed larger. Could this information close the gaps, or drown him further? He reached slowly for the folder, the flicker of light illuminating a new chapter. As the inky pages revealed yet another layer of his family's complexities, he wondered how many more revelations he could possibly endure. Would he finally navigate a way out, or become ensnared even deeper? Just as Jake's fingers grazed the file, the door swung open, and a figure entered, someone he hadn't counted on seeing. A face that was integral to both his present and his past. The atmosphere crackled with unspoken fear and possibility, compelling Jake to confront the ghost still haunting him. The transformation had only just begun. The figure that stepped through the door squeezed the breath from Jake's lungs. A jolt of recognition stirred within him, layered with complex emotions. It was his older brother, Ethan, the very man Jake had been frantically avoiding in recent years. Jake's heart raced, pounding like a drumbeat, as the past collided violently with the present. Ethan scanned the diner, his gaze settling on Jake before narrowing. There was a palpable tension that latched onto their eye contact, reminiscent of their childhood disputes over petty things that had now morphed into a larger, darker narrative. What was Ethan doing here? Was he aware of this meeting? The seconds stretched unbearably as everything around them dulled to a murmur and blurred into insignificance. Jake's instincts flared as he pulled his attention back to Maxine, who was fixated on Ethan with a look that suggested she had anticipated this moment. "You both know one another?" Maxine's voice cut through the silence, pulling Jake from his spiraling thoughts. "Great," Jake muttered, his forehead creasing. "This is just what I need." Ethan approached the booth, his body tense, albeit casual. "What's going on, Jake?" he asked, voice loaded with a mixture of concern and suspicion. The room felt impossibly small now, the weight of half-formed thoughts and regrets thickening the air. Jake's mind raced, strategizing chances, calculations of communication. Could he expose their history now? Did he want Ethan involved in this revelation? "I'm working on figuring out what really happened with our parents," Jake revealed, steadying himself against the inevitable pushback he anticipated from Ethan. Of course you are," Ethan interrupted, contempt lacing his tone. "You never wanted to face the realities of our past. You just want to sweep it under the rug again." Jake clenched his fist under the table, the heat of uncomfortable familiarity rushing back. He had always felt incapable of standing firm against Ethan's messiness. a reluctant enabler of their strained dynamics. "It's about facing it together," Jake countered, forcing calmness into his voice. Maxine leaned forward, bridging the chasm growing between the brothers. "Look, this isn't about what you think happened. It's about the deeper implications of that past. The games your parents played impacted both of you, and the consequences ripple well beyond just you two." Ethan's gaze darted between them, suddenly intrigued but skeptical. "What are you talking about?" Jake seized the moment, words spilling forth like a dam bursting. "This isn't just our family drama. It's about the deceit and manipulation that led to our lives feeling like a perpetual backdrop to someone else's story." Ethan's shoulders dropped slightly, the tension in his bearing easing. They were in uncharted territory. Introspection lay just beyond their reach. A flicker of unison ignited amidst their familial fire, igniting the need to uncover what lay buried. "Jake, Ethan hesitated, caught off guard. For a fleeting moment, Jake glimpsed vulnerability shining through his brother's defenses. "Can we just sit down for a moment and talk?" Maxine interjected, sensing the shifts happening between the two men. "There's critical information I can share. You both deserve to know how intricately your lives are intertwined with your parents' legacy." Jake's pulse quickened with the thrill of discovery yet again. Wisdom hovered nearby like a promise, tempting him. Was Ethan finally ready to join him in confronting their shared demons? As Maxine placed the folder on the table, Jake's heart raced. This was the crucible moment, one where secrets were ready to spill, potential pathways unfurling before them. But would the revelation strengthen their bond, or would the history they shared break them apart once and for all? Jake looked back at Ethan, determination flooding his system. What if this was the key to unraveling not just their parents' legacy, but healing the rift that had grown between them? As he opened the folder, the air crackled with possibility. The weight of the past hung thick around him, yet Jake felt a shift, a gradual acceptance of the complexity of redemption. What lay inside could either shatter them or forge a new connection. But was he ready for either outcome? Could he confront not just the legacy of their parents, but also the fragile connections that bound him to his brother? Then, as Jake read the words on the page, anticipation morphed into dread once again. He felt the world tilt, the fabric of their fragile reality starting to unravel at the seams. What had Maxine uncovered that could change everything? As Jake stared at the documents laid out before him, a tidal wave of anxiety surged. The pages contained revelations that wove a complex web involving his parents, their businesses, and the rivals they had failed to outmaneuver. But they also spoke of betrayals that implicated not only their legacy, but also directly pointed to Ethan. Jake's heart sank as he skimmed the paragraphs, the mismanagement, the deals struck in shadows, and ultimately the debts incurred which had haunted them for years. This was not just a lesson in business, but a painful portrait of their family's choices. Every line felt like a sword slicing through any lingering loyalty to the memories he had clung to. Ethan shifted, intrigued yet wary as he grasped the gravity of the situation. "What is this?" he asked, leaning closer, his curiosity piqued by the somberness of the unfolding drama. "It's the truth," Jake replied, voice steady despite the tremor of uncertainty bubbling inside. "The truth we've both avoided." The diner around them faded into irrelevance, the chatter of patrons a distant hum. Maxine remained watchful, clearly relishing the tension her interruption had unleashed. "You need to understand how your choices as brothers have been underpinned by your parents' decisions," she said, her voice fierce with conviction. "If you want to rewrite your own stories, it starts with confronting this." Jake locked eyes with Ethan, searching for a flicker of understanding within the storm of emotions swirling between them. They had lived their lives shackled by the burdens placed upon them, echoes of parental ideals, woven around resentment, confusion, and distance. But now, facing this convergence of truths, an opportunity arose. They could forge a new path, one rooted in honesty rather than inherited dysfunction. Ethan took a breath, his interest shifting from suspicion to something resembling urgency. "What's in those papers, Jake?" "They detail all the mistakes, and not just mistakes, the choices that led to our downfall," Jake emphasized, his tone resonating with newfound determination. "It's time we own it, all of it." As he read, the words echoed in his mind. Decisions rooted deep in desire, stakes raised high over ambition, the all-consuming need to succeed at the expense of their integrity. Ethan's face paled, the familiar flicker of anger bubbling below the surface as he recognized the implications of their parents' choices. "This can't be true," Ethan muttered under his breath, the reality crashing into him like a wave. "How could they do this to us?" "They didn't just do it to us. They did it to themselves," Jake pointed out, resolute. "We have the power to redefine their legacy, but only if we choose to face it to its full extent." In that moment, something shifted between them, a shift from anger to empathy. Jake realized they were both victims of the narrative their parents had authored, yet they wielded the quill to write the next chapter. He wasn't just confronting his family's past, he was extending a lifeline to Ethan. With each revelation, he could see Ethan wrestling with acceptance, steadfast pride dismantling before the truth. For so long, they had stood on opposite sides of their fractured family story, boxing themselves into roles carved by pain. But now, standing amidst the remnants of their legacy, Jake dared to reach across the divide. "I know you're angry, Ethan, but we can't let their failures define us any longer. We need to confront this together. Are you in?" Ethan hesitated, visibly grappling with the onslaught of emotions surging through him. He could cling to the anger, burdening himself with the weight of history, or he could step into this new chapter. Slowly, a transformation emerged on his face, eyes brightening with the flicker of realization, an acceptance of vulnerability. "What do we do next, then?" he asked, not dismissive but interested, a true inquiry rather than a challenge. Jake felt a rush of hope. The path before them was daunting, yet they could navigate it if they stood as one. "We confront the people involved, the businesses that still echo our parents' legacy. We create transparency, rebuild, and prove that we can do better." Maxine nodded, her approval evident. "It's time you trusted each other with the legacy. The past cannot be changed, but the future is still unwritten." Moments passed in breathless silence. They were not just brothers, but two men bound by the complexity of their family's saga, ready to chart a course forward free of the burdens placed upon them. Jake felt an unfamiliar warmth settle within him, a realization that he had evolved through this arduous journey. It was not only about reckoning with their parents, it was about reclaiming their identities, embodying strength that arose from vulnerability. "Let's do this," Jake urged, heart racing. And as both brothers signaled a tentative but determined alliance, the energy shifted in the small diner. What once felt filled with inherited despair now brimmed with potential, a shared yearning to succeed and to redefine. Together, they could face the truth, confront the shadows of their past, and build a legacy reflective of their own understanding of integrity. They were carving out a new identity, united not by resentment, but by a shared resolve. As they left the diner, Jake realized he stood on the precipice of true growth. Acknowledging their flaws and illuminating their path shone brightly. In that clarity, he discovered confidence, independence, and most importantly, the notion of family redefined. Jake had transformed, once enmeshed in the chaos of grief and uncertainty, now a man poised to take ownership of his life. And side by side with Ethan, he felt their united strength become an unstoppable force, ready to extinguish the chains that had held them back for far too long. Now was the moment to craft their legacy, rewriting the narrative of their family into one of resilience, authenticity, and shared dignity. The past would always be a part of them, but the future lay just ahead, waiting for the courageous hue of their newly forged path. In that moment of clarity, an urgent need rose within him. He turned to Ethan, resolved. This is only the beginning. Let's show the world what we can achieve, together. Now, share your thoughts on Jake and Ethan's transformative journey and what legacy means to you in the comments below. If you found inspiration in their story, show your support by leaving a like to feed the algorithm and help others discover this emotional ride. And listen carefully. You need to subscribe now so you don't miss out on more exclusive stories of personal growth and transformation. Don't wait even one more second to share this video with at least 5 friends who need this conclusion in their lives. Your actions can light the path for others seeking their own journeys of overcoming.